Alberta planning to build 2 involuntary care centres for people living with addiction. The facilities in Calgary and Edmonton would treat people with addiction issues considered a, quote, danger to themselves or others without their consent. For more on how this could work and will work, Dan Williams is Alberta's Minister of Mental Health and Addiction. He joins us this morning from Edmonton. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lindsay.
So addictions experts are raising doubts over whether involuntary treatment centres are effective. A research summary from the U.S. National Library of Medicine says involuntary treatment is less effective and potentially more harmful than voluntary treatment. What evidence are you basing this decision on?
Well, Lindsay, the choice we have in front of us, we have to deal with the realities, and the public addiction crisis has just gotten worse and worse. It's the same in the streets of Edmonton as it is in Halifax, Toronto, and Vancouver. I had one individual in the province of Alberta who overdosed 186 times on opioids last year. That we recorded. It's likely more than that when you count the times that don't get reported to the provincial health authority. And so the choice that I'm facing as a minister and that we're facing as a society is whether that 187th time is tragically not a revival and a death, or before that happens, there's treatment. And so that's what compassionate intervention is. It says that if somebody's a danger to themselves or others because of their drug use or addiction, then we as a society need to intervene. And that's what this $180 million was about. Building 2 facilities, not as a criminal justice process, but as a healthcare process. For some reason, when it comes to addiction in our country, the experts have been telling us for decades that we need to continue building more drug injection sites, that we need unsafe supply into our streets and into our communities. Alberta's taken a different approach. We believe that recovery is not only possible, but likely if you provide that path, and that every Albertan, and I believe Canadian, deserves an opportunity at recovery if they're in addiction. And it's not at all compassionate to leave somebody in -40 weather, intermittently homeless, speedballing methamphetamine and fentanyl, overdosing hundreds of times in a year, to say that's a lifestyle choice. The alternative to treatment is unconscionable, and we shouldn't allow it as a country.
How would this work, though? I'm just trying to picture this. So someone is deemed unsafe to themselves or others. So who gets involved? How does that intervention happen? Do they physically get taken there and then they're told you can't leave here? I mean, how does it work?
Well, in Alberta, we already have a piece of legislation called PCHAD, Protection for Children Abusing Drugs, which is for children under 18 if they're in drug use or addiction. Across every province in this country, we have mental health acts that say that if you're a danger to yourself or others because of your mental illness, schizophrenia perhaps, and you're having delusions and acting erratically, then you can have mandatory treatment. And there are legal tests that we have in each of these. So the test that we're going to have in legislation that I'll introduce soon is if somebody is likely to cause serious harm to themselves or others within a reasonable amount of time, and each of those words means something legally, then a commission with a legal expert, a healthcare expert, and a member of the public is going to be able to review that. And if they meet that standard, potentially have some sort of treatment prescribed to them, maybe even mandatory treatment if it's a true danger to themselves or others that has no other recourse. And of course, all of this is going to be reviewable by the courts through judicial review.
Just thinking about, somebody doesn't want to be helped, right? So you put them into this involuntary facility and they get out. And I'm just thinking about the cycle of this, right? Because if they don't want to be helped, they're going to just go back to the addiction. So then effectively, are you not spending more money because you're constantly entering people into this cycle?
Well, this isn't primarily about dollars and cents, but if you want to look at it that way, Lindsay, every single emergency room visit, never mind acute care overnight stay in beds, never mind emergency vehicle response, is worth thousands, if not tens of thousands, every single time. So if we look at that individual 186-time overdose, or there's close to 700 Albertans that are hitting an emergency room, never mind acute care or EMS, over 10 times a year, the total dollar cost of that to our emergency system, clogging up or ERs, so family members with children with a broken arm or an ear infection can't get in. It's very, very, very much more cost effective if we deal with this in the less acute recovery space than in the emergency space. But as I said, this isn't about dollars and cents.
Okay. But the $180 million in funding is for these two treatment facilities. Why not put that money into voluntary treatment centers to have a greater success rate?
We are building voluntary recovery centers. We're building 11 across this province. Each of them are 75 to 100 beds, men and women both. 5 of them are Indigenous owned and led. We're building them on reserve or on the Métis community land. And this is going to be leading the country when it comes to recovery capacity. Alberta's massively increased our recovery capacity with treatment spaces of detox and treatment. Since we got in as Conservatives in 2019, we've more than doubled our total capacity, adding close to 20,000 treatment spaces per year. It's a both and question, Lindsay. We need to make sure that, yes, those people who need treatment and looking for treatment have access to it, but also not only is there a question of personal and human dignity to somebody who's overdosing hundreds of times a year, there's a public safety question. You and I and our community members have the right to not inhale secondhand crystal meth smoke, and if somebody is having a schizophrenic break because of the fentanyl they're consuming along with their methamphetamine, and they're fencing with a used syringe out front of the local recreation center, that's not appropriate. We should have safe spaces for our families to be able to go to the rec center or go shopping and play sports. And so this small but recalcitrant group of people that are not seeking out voluntary treatment, they're often not only the greatest danger to themselves but the community. And so I think the responsible thing to do here is not a law enforcement mechanism, but a healthcare procedure, a healthcare mechanism that allows individuals, Albertans, to get the healthcare they deserve. Because the alternative, Lindsay, to treatment and recovery with someone in addiction, tragically, especially those individuals we're talking about at the far end of the spectrum, the alternative to that recovery, it's death. And I think that's unconscionable, it's un-Canadian, it's uncompassionate.
Alberta Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, Dan Williams, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lindsay.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.